Welcome back again to the Channel Automation Podcast. I'm joined here by Vic Sun, our mastermind of the series, and Stephen White, our resident call center expert. And of course, there's me, Casey Urias, just asking questions and trying to get to the bottom of what is the best way for you can get great lead conversion. How you guys doing today?
I'll start us off. Think I'm doing great. I've had a great day so far. Weather's beautiful and just ready to get going today. How are you doing, Vic?
Good, good. Super Bowl just happened, so that was an exciting Sunday. Lots of exciting plays and really cool. I like watching the ads. I actually enjoy watching the ads more than sometimes watching the game.
Mm.
And so I just pay attention to the ads, and I thought there were some interesting ones there. There was one about Jesus, which was actually two about Jesus. That was pretty interesting.
Funny, once you get into
I
marketing,
watched the Puppy Bowl, so I can't relate.
Yeah. I mean, there were some good ones there. I like the show with Rihanna. That was pretty good. After, she said she would not do those things, and then she was there. So that was pretty awesome. Big fan of hers. So
Yeah. No, she's awesome. All right. Going into the fun topics of today, we're going to be talking about empowering your agents and what we should have for a standardization of call center success. And so, one of the things that we have very strong opinions on here at Channel Automation is what we think that agents and call centers are able to do. And we have a lot of back knowledge on this just from experience training agents one on one. We've gone through many, many, many people and we've kind of gotten their personalities. And then we also have delivered tasks that, managers have been a little bit hesitant on. And some of the things that I want to talk about today are direct comments or questions that are from managers or upper management or even CEOs. And so I wanted to get your guys' opinion on these comments that I've gotten. First one is, my conversion numbers are so low. I feel like agents aren't even trying. What do you have to say about that? Let's start with Steven this time.
yeah, my conversion numbers are so low. There could be a lot that there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I think the easiest one that seems to be the one we have the most agency over is the human element. We see people sitting in the desks and they're the ones that are converting or not converting. Maybe you heard a really terrible phone call and the last time you went around and you did your rounds of listening to phone calls and you start to think, well, I heard that one terrible anecdotally. I have that terrible instance of someone not really trying their best. And maybe I can attribute that to other instances. And you start to kind of create um, this perceived idea of it's the agents that are that are causing this issue. But if you narrow it down to just the agents, I think you're not really looking at the full picture because there's a lot. I mean, this lead, it's coming into the system, it's getting contacted. There's a certain amount of time between that and maybe start to receive some messaging, or you might want to look at like what's the content of the messaging, how is it being received. Are the agents when they first are on the phone with somebody, like how are they handling those first few seconds? Obviously, is a big part of it. Um, but there's so much more to it that I don't think it's a very good. I don't think it's adequate to say my agents aren't trying. What are your thoughts on that, Vic?
so if you look at some of the most successful um, businesses in the country that offer customer service or they have a call center, they have a contact center, customer service sort of channel, right? I'll use Amazon as an example. Um, it's well known that they have call centers across the world, right?
Right.
And it's not always local people that you're chatting with or you even talking to. They have call centers in the Philippines and India, some parts of Europe, and a lot of their agents are not from the United States. And I agree with you with regards to there's a lot of elements aside from, well, my agents aren't converting. And that's really one of the poorest. I'll disregard the poor syntax, on that. where you try to get that question answered, and it's like there's so much issues with it. Um, but there's a lot of elements that aren't being provided to the agents, and so now you look. I'll tell a story about Amazon, for example. So with Amazon call centers or agents, when they're trained, they're not trained to handle issues. They're trained to get the customer towards their end goal. So they're basically accepting that the customer has their own sets of goals and priorities that has nothing to do with Amazon policy or procedures. So just think about that, right?
Mhm.
They're training their agents to make the strategy of the customer win, not their not necessarily a policy or procedure. And when you start looking at call centers across the United States, and this is in the US, in industries like home services and even big industries like airlines and e-commerce, agents are trained to follow procedure and policy. They're basically taught not to think. Now, Casey made a mention a while ago. I just want to digress a little bit. We do have opinions on this personally. Our company doesn't necessarily work with everybody because, we do have a particular type of company that we work with. But we do know that many of our customers, including the ones that are potential customers, they all have these elements of these issues because essentially the core, the question that Casey posed, or at least one of the comments has been, my agents aren't converting, what do I do? How do I help them? And it's insane how a lot of companies, if you really, really dig deep and you look at their processes, just like what you said, Stephen, like there's so many elements, right? They're trained to fail. They are basically setting up their agents for failure. And the one element, there's so many, but there's one element in there is that they're so trained to follow process and procedure to the level where if policy and procedure, okay, is in place and you're supposed to follow it versus customer satisfaction, the agent has to follow policy and procedure, even if it means creating a dissatisfied customer. What do you think?
Can you think of I'm starting to think of examples off the top of my head where I've heard and maybe even seen a few of these. Uh, Mine are probably not the best. Can you think of anything off the top of your head you might want to?
I I do. Like, think about this, right? You call you call a company like
Uh-huh.
an inbound call. And there are companies out there that have this. All you have to do is test it, right? You contact these large companies and then you go, "Can you give me a price on the phone?"
That's what I was thinking. The
And
same
okay,
example.
because in home services, like if you're getting a quote or estimate on your roof or your windows or a bathroom, siding, solar, they train their agents to go and say, "Do not give a price over the phone." Right? In fact, they're going to train them not to know how to deal with that other than try to use a rebuttal towards this. And they call this an objection and not a question. They go, "Look, what you have to do is you need to sell the value of the visit. You
Hmm.
need to sell them the idea that can give you an estimate, which makes sense, right? It is logical. How can you give a price over the phone if you're literally not looking at the roof or the bathroom or the windows? You haven't measured, you haven't selected options. And so you don't have all these elements that you can now use to calculate for price.
Hmm.
Okay. But that's not really what the problem is not the logical side of it, if you think about it. When people are asking, can you give me a price so that I know if I can afford this? I mean, what are they really asking?
Am I wasting my time by talking to you?
It
Maybe.
could be, right?
Yeah.
It could be, you know, I don't know if I even want to go through this, but they're not training their agents to handle those things.
Mm.
They're training their like so that I mean you can just tell and this is an interesting topic where we could go and say, is our call centers in danger of being replaced by artificial intelligence in the future? The immediate answer is probably yes. But here's why. And that's because you just go across all these call centers, especially the ones here in the US, and then they are provided this question: can you give me a price over the phone? Something that they can't do. You don't even have, like, there's not even like a thought being put on it. Like, if you just listen to the conversations, or if you try it yourself, the agent isn't even absorbing the question. They're not even like, huh, let me think about this and really ask you more questions and kind of figure it. No, it's like immediately they go into their rebuttal. So you start thinking about, like, oh, all these things that people are saying, oh, AI one day is going to replace these agents. Yeah, because you're training them to be stupid, and really not equipping them with any sort of way to absorb the information, dig deeper, and really try to get the customer to, their strategy or their concern to be addressed. What you're trying
Yeah,
to do
one of
is
the
this.
things that Vic used to do, was like a kind of like a practice, and I just have witnessed him doing this, and every single time is sort of like I'm sitting on the sidelines eating popcorn, where they're like, "Go ahead and use the script that you have, and use the same programs that your agents are using, and show me, like, get on a call with somebody and show me how you can convert an appointment using all of that stuff." And you can just see the call center managers sort of like, "Oh no, now I see what's missing." It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's a good point that where, if you want to test, because if you're thinking, one of the elements that's missing or that's contributing to the lack of conversions is me not having a good enough script on training, then yeah, you should, as a manager, or if you're a trainer, do it yourself. Go and read through that thing over and over, through dozens, if not hundreds of phone calls, record it, and see, the outcomes, of the same things that you're preaching, and see if that works. But really, I think, again, that analogy that I'm talking about, right? Going back to it, the large companies have figured out something so simple. Like, I'm just using Amazon. You call Amazon with an issue, they're not going to argue with you. You know what I mean? They're not going to go and tell you, by the way, here's our policy on that return item, or because you're dissatisfied with something and you open the box and you open the item and you use it for a few days. No, they're basically going to try to make you satisfied, and they're going to say, what do you want to do? They're the ones asking you the question. They're trying to, and it's a really clever strategy that Amazon and a lot of companies are taking. And it's really, tell me how you want me to solve this, so I could get you so much faster to satisfaction. And then somehow along the way, if there's a really angry person, they let that person vent, and they're just apologetic. Now, what's interesting is the fact that a lot of these jobs are outsourced somewhere else, in cultures where people who work in these positions are conciliatory, they're accepting of their roles as a servant. They're not I guess you are a servant, but it's like, people always say servant leadership is a nice thing, but when you call somebody customer service a servant, or has that service oriented attitude, it's like, it's not PC. But really, they have that service mentality. The customer is right. The customer is somebody who, you need to honor, and you need to make them happy. And I think that's how Amazon continues to get people to continue to buy. Like, you'll have a bad experience for one item, and you'll want to return it, and you'd want to vent, and they'll go, yeah, we'll do that. And on top of that, they go above and beyond, which is really clever. They have an algorithm, and I'm fairly certain that they're using some sort of virtual assistant for their agent, right? Machine learning that says, look, this customer's purchases X amount of dollars, and this return means nothing. And if you make them happy, they'll buy more. And so on certain returns, I've experienced this over the past I would say 15 years that I've been an Amazon customer, they'll just randomly, it's not all the time, but they'll randomly go, for the inconvenience, we've also added $5. Now you can only use this $5 on Amazon. Keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Okay. But you were called, you were probably upset about something, you were chatting with them, you know, um, and you were trying to return something and you're probably upset about it and you're like, this is such an inconvenience. They let you do it. They'll say, we're gonna pay for that. In fact, right now you don't even have to box these things up. You just drive over to a Kohl's or to a UPS, right? Or an Amazon locker, you drop it in, they scan your phone, this QR code, and you're done. You don't even have to box it. They'll do it for you. And then on top of that, they'll give you $5. And now you're thinking to yourself, I'll spend this money. I bought that item, I returned it. But guess what you're doing now? You're not gonna buy something again. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And you don't have any control over their pricing, so you don't even check when you go, "I got $5, so I'll spend an additional 5, $10 there." The point here is that if you value this story, if you like that story, the true moral, if there is one, is this: Amazon has figured out a way to create customer satisfaction because they have accepted this is what people want, and if you give them what they want, you can in all likelihood, sell them more stuff and they'll continue to buy from you. And they've done the math, which really, if there's any math that should be done in conversion, it should be repeat business, reputation, and all of these other factors, and not just that one transactional piece, which I think in some industries, they miscalculate. Like for home services, the common, I don't know if you guys have heard this, a lot of people will say, we don't really think about repeat business because somebody only does their roof every 20, 30 years. Or if there's like a natural disaster and the roof fails or it gets damaged, which I think, yeah, it's pretty easy to make that claim and to say, yeah, well, that's right. One person, right? Yet you're marketing to will only do it once. But you know what a lot of companies are failing to do, whether it's roofing, solar, ticket items, is this: you're not really marketing to that one person. What you're marketing to is all the other people, right, that haven't done their project yet. And there's essentially more of them because if you just look at your database and you do the math and you say, how many leads did I get that didn't buy after I purchased the leads within 30 days? And it's probably overwhelming majority. So I think the conversion question here today, which is about how do I make my agents convert better? I think, how do I make the customer, again, the subjective reality that I've kind of talked about in some of other podcasts, um, people should try to discover that because I think they're fighting a losing battle. I think they're just, you know what I mean? It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. You're using the wrong tools. You're trying to solve the problem the wrong way.
Well, to a certain extent, I can understand, like the agent perspective, especially if they're not being paid as much as other people in the company, or they're not being paid. Maybe they have a second job because they're trying to kind of subsidize what they need to just live their day to day life. It's really easy to just kind of turn your brain off and then continuously just read the same script over and over and over again. Now, to innovate or to care about conversion, that's challenging. That's something that you can't really teach somebody to do, they have to want to do it. One of the things that, we also have had brought up to us before because, we're really big proponents of training agents to do more. That's why we have the texting option where people can send engaging and interesting content through channel automation. We have agents doing that. That's not just like an exclusive manager or CEO thing. These are agents that are doing it. And one of the things that we hear all the time is, my agents only know how to make phone calls and I don't trust them to do more than how would you counteract that point, with that lack of trust? Like, where does that lack of trust come from? Because if they haven't had the opportunity to have these agents doing other tasks before, why would a manager or a CEO be hesitant to give them that task? Like, where you think that thought process comes from.
I think that for a lot of call center managers, it it may be that they're worried about upskilling their agents, or they're worried about spending the resources required to um, get their agents to be what their ideal is. It might take away from the time they have to make calls, and some of that time is tied up in calling. Like we mentioned last week, the 90% of leads that don't convert, and it's just like, well, we haven't got enough calls on these. We keep getting through. Turnover is too much. What's the point of even? I'm kind of going through the motions here of what a call center manager talks about, because we talk to so many. There's no reason to spend time on investing in a call center person. Uh, you know, on average, we're only going to have them for um, I don't know, maybe 3 to 7 months, and then once we lose them, we're gonna have to turn around and train someone else new. Why am I gonna spend the time and energy on training someone that's not gonna stick around? Once they get better skilled, they're just gonna find a better job. Maybe it's best if I keep them at, like, a certain level, just because it's more affordable to not have to hire somebody in a few months. Aside from, the handful that are, I don't know, diehard call center folks that will always be there. And those ones seem pretty set in their ways, just from how I've seen things. Of course, like, just going through a culture shifter to encourage people to be more interested in growing their skills, becoming better representatives, kind of affecting the things that they see. And I'm getting a little vague here, just because I know that everyone has their own call center with their own processes. But like, if you can find someone that takes ownership and is willing to learn, that's probably, your grade A call center rep, that's able to improve the way they do things, and then also affect the people around them to improve how they do things as well. What do you think, man?
I think it boils down to the person. And so, I've done this and I've consulted with companies from, $500 million to 5 million. And with call centers, it starts with the agent. And a lot of businesses don't look at that. They look at the budget. So they go, I have 10 seats or 20 call center seats, and I want to pay them $15 an hour or something like this. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll motivate them with a bonus. And every demo or every appointment or every sale that they make, they'll get a bonus. And then they do the math from that. And then they go, well, they need X amount of phone calls. I think that's a losing battle, especially I've done it, right? Many, many years where I've tried several strategies, different situations, different demographics. And the one truth that I found was this. When I decided I'm going to focus on the people, it became apparently clear that it was those individuals that were the ones that I would hold accountable to certain goals. And if I stuck to those people and I figured out a way to get more of them, then I could build a system around those individuals. Right. So, couple of things that and this is a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about are things that I had success with, and I've recommended them to several companies. So it's like your mileage will vary. If you listen to the podcast and say, "I'm going to try that," it's not necessarily going to work for you unless you do it with a lot of testing. But I found that if you had a market, and let's say the inexperienced people who will work in a call center on average was going to be paid $15. You'd want to go 20 to 30% above that. So you'd go and say, I want to dominate that area because I want the top of the food chain people, not the bottom of the barrel. So I'd now pay 18 to 20
Mhm.
that's not like, oh, with the bonuses. No, no, no. You pay them. If everybody's getting paid 15, I'm going to pay 20. This way, if there was an ad, my ad would be at the top of their list. And they'd be like, this is similar, and this company pays, so much more money. Okay. There would still be bonuses, but most of the bonuses would be team based and company, like your department has to hit it. So you work as a team. The other thing was I looked at the people. So I would look at particular qualities. You know what I mean? Do they ask a lot of questions? I even set up tests for people, because the resumes just didn't do it for me. So I
Yeah, I
would
got
test them.
PTSD from that still.
Yeah, you test them on certain things, like, you test their patience, for example. So a lot of people might like if people hear this, they'll go like, "What? You can't do that." Well, I did. So whenever I'd interview, and I'd usually interview, people by groups or by bulk, but I'd make them wait, and then we would record them from the reception area or wherever there were. We'd make them wait. I'd make them wait 20, 30 minutes. If the interview was at 10, you know, we wouldn't show up from like 10:15, 10:30, and just see who are the people, who are patient. Some people would be like, "Oh, I have another interview." And then they were like, "Is it going to happen?" And the respectful ones who came to the reception or to try to kind of negotiate their way to get it much faster, they got in. That was like the first round of the interview. The ones who just left or the ones who didn't try to communicate, we knew they would never do well, at least in our organizations, over the phone. Because if you don't have patience and you don't know how to communicate or verbalize your frustration in a creative way to get to what you want, how the hell are you going to go and ask an angry person or a person who's not curious, or for something that you want, like an appointment or something like this, right? So I think those are the things that you can do in order for you to now say, I'm going to give my agents more, or I'm going to give them more responsibility. Because let's face it, if you're paying bare minimum, you're trying to scrape at the bottom of the barrel from all these candidates, because good people, by the way, have jobs already. And you're thinking, I'm going to ask these guys to do more than just make phone calls or leave messages. You have to ask the question, do I have people who are capable of handling more, of being trained? Because just like you, Stephen, I do have some skepticism, even with myself over the years. Like, is training really going to help? Because if I'm training a schmuck, you know what I mean, like a dumb to go and do something
Mm.
that I thought, oh, yeah, you're gonna do well. You're gonna be a superstar with this type of training. It's pretty arrogant of me. Like, that's why I stay away from training, like sales, like paying for sales training, those sort of things. Because I think there's a lot of data to show that 80 to 90% of that is like garbage. It's like it just goes to the garbage. It's like waste. Because if you're training people who aren't really going to be capable to harness that training, then it's going to not be effective, right? In case in point here, just take a look at BUDS or SEAL training, Navy SEALs. They don't just let anybody train. It's not like you can just go, you know what? I'm 300-pound overweight guy who I saw something on YouTube about Navy SEALs. I'm going to train as a SEAL. You can't just show up there and go like, I'm going to go and train. No, you know what I mean? You've got to qualify. You've got to be this, and that. You've got to have all of these things. And then, you know what? Because and their training most likely works because you can see it. The people that they're training have the capability. And even those people, many of them fail. Do you see what I mean?
Mhm.
But they stopped thinking about, and many years ago they did this. I read this somewhere. I could be wrong, but they stopped recruiting for SEAL training because they thought, we're not going to recruit everybody. Like, you have to have a certain type of you need to be a certain type of person to even receive this training. And I think that's the best way to handle these things, even with the call center agents, is, you know, look at your math. It's probably wrong. You need to go and overpay for that role, especially if you keep talking about having the best call center or the best people. And then you look at those people and then you hire capable recruiters who can recruit based on those particular personalities and create really interesting tests in real life that you can really test them for that type of personality, type, that phenotype. You know what I mean? Like, I would test for people who have very respectful, creative in their ability to go and persuade you. They are good listeners. They ask a lot of questions. Like, the minute that this person starts talking about themselves more in an interview, I already know, like, you're not going to be one of our agents because our agents here, they ask a ton of questions. They're not really doing a lot of the talking. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I
I
got,
can
yeah.
understand that. When it comes to call centers that have had very loyal agents, let's say it's call centers that, they're like, well, we have really high turnover, but Jenna, she's been here for like 20 years. She's been consistent. She gets enough appointments. We really want to get them on this new and improved system, but Jenna doesn't even know how to look at a computer. Like, are we just kind of ignoring this group? Because we're talking about bringing people in, what to look for a good interview. But what about these kind of people who are sort of set in their ways? Like, is there a chance for them to get good and to be hungry and to adapt to something a little bit different in a call center? What do you think?
I think it's possible. I think that it just requires a system that's easy to use and navigate with someone that's willing to learn. I've spent more than my fair share of hours teaching someone how to copy and paste, even simple keystrokes like a Control F to find something on a page. I mean, learning it is one thing, and then if they have the ability to follow through and actually utilize that in a live environment where they're learning about like, "Oh, man, I'm looking for this person's name on this page. I can't I have to look through it," and they're wasting, like, 30 minutes. "Wait, what was that thing I learned?" As soon as they can use that, I know that that person is ready to learn new skill, someone that can, adapt to a new situation. I know those are, like, simple
I
things.
personally love adaptable people, like, when I've been in interviews with people, somebody who I can really throw them a curveball, and sometimes it's just during the beginning conversation, like, I'll be like, "Hi, how are you? Here's the weather. By the way, what's your favorite animal?" "Oh, yeah, cool, that's really cool. I like these kind of animals because of this, this, and this," and I'll throw something kinda spicy in there just to kinda see what their reaction is because I think thinking on the fly and being able to remain composed
Mhm.
is also a very important skill for a call center agent.
Yeah. I recall training for, I we did a bunch of like setting up for Home Depots and Costco's and Sam's Clubs across the country and had to go in there and train with people. And so I thought to myself, and I got to interview people. So I said, you know what, no more classroom interviews, no more interviews in the office. I'm going to interview them right where they're going to work. You know what I mean? So they call like at Home Depot, they call this the track. Because at Home Depot, it's like it's like a racetrack almost, and that's kind of like where the foot traffic would be
Mhm.
for the most part. And so you see Home Depot stores with a booth. It's usually in the front. They call that like the premium spot for the racetrack. So I would go in there and I would interview the people, and I would go, "Can you like? Here's the interview." They give me a resume. I'm like, "Great, thanks." Right? Do you have any questions first? And then we go through some pleasantries and some initial questions. And I go, this is the job. Let's see if you can do it. And I'll just go and have them, talk to complete strangers and customers. You know what I mean? And I knew right away that the first reaction is usually the one that tells you what's going to happen. Usually, right? Not everything. Some people can surprise you, but when they go, "Oh, this is what it is. I'm gonna be actually talking to strangers." And I go, "Yeah, promoting. You're supposed to go and try to bother, most people you'll be bothering. Most people, they'll be happy for you to just smile at them and have a conversation. But yeah, you'll be bothering people while they're shopping. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get their attention, right? Um, you'd know right away, like, because their expression, they're like a deer at headlights. They don't know what to do. The ones that ask questions like, "What would you like me to say?" And they were very calm. They knew that this was the job, and they were like, "Should I knew, okay, this person right here has some sort of, you know, um, a chance at least to succeed." But I think this is where you would want to go and train for your agents, including the call center, is maybe your first thing is having them go on the phone, interviewing them that way, kind of putting them in the situation where there's an angry situation. Um, Sometimes you have to simulate a damn thing. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
had a recruiter who was willing to go with my my cuckoo ideas when recruiting, and I would ask him, I would tell him, I would ask him, I'd say, "Can you, when you call them, go and act like you're angry that they didn't fill out the application correctly and see how they react to it, how they maneuver that." And he was like, "What do you mean?" So I just make something up. Like, go, you didn't fill out the application correctly, or you used the wrong, the resume was terrible and it didn't have this information, and just remain quiet and see what they do, and then send me that recording because we recorded all the conversations anyway, right? Um, and it was interesting that we would get people who would in fact apologize and try to ask questions like, what was the right way? And then you just have people that go, well, you didn't tell, like they were just, because they knew it was a recruiter and not a customer, but that's who they really were. So they were like proud, or they were just like, not at all conciliatory. They were just like, well, you didn't tell me how to submit it. I submitted exactly on your website. They try to blame the website language and those sort of things. And right away, the recruiter would just tell me, you might not like this guy. It's okay. All right. You listen to it, like he was just like blaming everything from the website to the forum to everything. I said, okay, well, don't even bother sending me I don't even want to listen to the call if you think like he's not. And I think that's a really clever way of hiring for people. And it's also more effective because this whole talking to each other, you see that all the time, right? Like somebody sits down in front of you and then you're interviewing and you're trying to
Mhm.
simulate something like, what do you say if you do this? Well, they're in a freaking interview. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
gonna try to impress you. It's really dumb, you know what I mean? Make them uncomfortable and put them there, not in an appropriate way, but in the way that here's the challenge. Because Casey's question was how do we give them more responsibility? How do we provide them with this sort of thing? Well, those responsibilities are challenges, no? From learning a new system to learning a new script or talking to someone, put them in those positions so you can actually see how they react to it. And then use that as a barometer toward deciding, okay, I can have more conversations with them or more with the team. I mean, obviously there's a lot of layers to it, but I wish that more people would do that. Because
I
if
think that
not,
that
you
is
just
really, really solid advice. And part of what we do here at Channel Automation is we do work directly with your call center team when we are implementing channel automation because we want to make sure that your managers, owners, and the call center team all are aware exactly how the system works. So that way, if their agents are bringing up troubles that they have with it, or if they're really happy with it, that they know exactly where they're coming from and they're like, "Oh, okay. We are aware of how you use the tools because we have given you the tools to use, and we've used it ourselves." And I make sure everybody uses the tools during training, and so does Steven, so does Vic. And so, if you are interested in checking out channel automation, of course, give us a call or give us a text or an email, reach out to us in some way. Or if you have some strong opinions on what we're talking about on this podcast, we'd love to have you on or, shoot us a message as well. We'll read it out and we're going to address it just like how we've been doing on the last couple podcasts that we've had here. So I am fully thinking and aware of the most common concerns that upper management brings to us, and we're here to help you solve it. So, thank you very much again for joining us. I know your time is valuable, and hopefully, you learned something and you have some thinking points, something to chew on going forward with your call center management and the experience. So, thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.